Hi, Andrew from Sachs, and welcome to video number 1 in our 7-video sequence, our latest sequence on leadership. This is a view of leadership taking 3 perspectives. Firstly, we'll be talking about well-being and how we achieve well-being in life and well-being at work, but especially how to lead for well-being. Then we'll be talking about productivity and how to lead for productivity, and finally, talking about leadership for development and growth. But this first video deals with the question of the ideal employee. Now, what do we mean by the ideal employee? We're really raising the question that if you seek to develop your workforce, it may be worthwhile thinking about what makes the ideal employee. And this diagram hopes to capture that. We're talking about the fact that there are outcomes that need to be achieved by the ideal employee. And the ideal employee should be somebody who gets the job done, so the quality and quantity of their work is satisfactory at least. And secondly, that the quality and quantity of their relationships is satisfactory at least. So if you've got an employee that gets the job done and is a cultural exemplar to the rest of the organisation or meets your value set or however you want to put it, then that's an example of the ideal employee. Now the question arises, how do we achieve this ideal? Well, there are a number of capabilities to consider in recruitment and promotion, particularly in recruitment, although not just in recruitment, because if you're going to promote somebody, sometimes we turn our best technician into our worst leader by virtue of promoting them for characteristics which are technical, but in fact the moment that they step into leadership roles, that kind of human component becomes more important. There are certain things which are largely genetically determined, and they're in this diagram under the heading nature. So things like cognitive ability is very nature-based. Then there's integrity, which is really about the degree to which people are honest and truthful and straightforward. And then there's personality. And personality has these 6 characteristics, which I will go into in a little bit more detail later in this sequence of events. But this is what's known as the hexaco or 6-factor model of personality. And you'll see integrity, modesty, that's the degree to which I'm honest and not arrogant. Emotionality, which is the degree to which I am emotionally stable. Then we have extroversion, and there are some jobs that suit extroverts and some jobs that suit introverts. Then there's absence of anger, and we know in a general sense that employees who have low anger tend to be better employees, and there are less complaints and less staff turnover both from them and around them. Then there's conscientiousness, which is to say that we know that employees who are inclined to try hard and be organised are certainly better employees than employees who don't have much motivation or perhaps are completely disorganised in the way they tackle their work. And finally, openness to experience. Openness to experience is really about being willing to take on new things. And there are jobs where it's important to be willing to take on new things and other jobs where it doesn't matter so much. The things on the left-hand side of this graphic are things which are largely inherited, between, let's say, 50 and 80%. Now, on the other side of the equation is the things that fit into the nurture category. So that's things like our skills, our experience and qualifications, and our attributes. So to achieve the ideal employee, you have to recruit people who have the right characteristics, but then you need to provide them with the opportunity to grow and develop within your organisation. Now, the question of the ideal employee comes down to something that I like to call the SPoH or LOF equation. SPoH stands for safe pair of hands. There are times when you want to recruit and all you want is a safe pair of hands. You want somebody who's going to do this job right here, right now. And maybe you don't care that much about how they're going to turn out in the future. The alternative to SPoH is LOF, leader of the future. A leader of the future kind of a concept says, all right, well, this person's smart enough to do this job, but in fact, this second candidate is smart enough to do a more senior job, so we're going to recruit the second candidate because they have the potential to become a leader of the future. I use cognitive ability because that's often a kind of a glass ceiling capability. Employees who are not smart enough tend not to rise up through levels of seniority in the same way as employees would who are smarter. There are other characteristics too. Personality can be a glass ceiling effect as well. It depends on what you're looking for, but I think the one thing I would say is that if you don't recruit enough leaders of the future and you're recruiting only for the here and now, you run the risk in terms of succession planning. The contemporary approach to succession planning is what might be called a bench strength kind of an approach. You remember those old succession planning models, the leadership pipeline as it's sometimes described? Well, the leadership pipeline has lost credibility over recent years because it turns out to be a sieve. Many of the people that we plan to move up through these various roles to take over some senior position actually leave or change their mind or change careers or something like that. So the alternative is a more organic approach, which is to recruit a whole bunch of talented people at comparatively lower levels in the organisation, and then use that talent, once they get to know the organisation, to step up into the more senior roles. So it's almost like if you create the right number, the right mass of people who are less senior in the organisation, your succession planning challenge kind of solves itself to a certain extent. That's the contemporary way of doing it. Now, in the next video, we'll be turning our attention to well-being, and there will be 3 videos in that sequence: well-being in life, well-being at work, and leadership for well-being. And that's the important one in terms of guidance for how you can lead your organisation to optimise well-being.